That's it, Mr. President.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming down. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nice work, you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. How you doing? How's the traffic today? I can imagine.
It's weird because sometimes you can hit it. Just to update everybody on where we stand with the police station. You've met Janet before here. We've done a presentation or two here. So what we did is the construction costs are pretty high in any new project today. Therefore, we took one last look at, and there was some talk within the police department and some talk from some of the councilors and the people in the community about what is the, have we looked at maybe renovating and expanding the existing building and kind of going into the parking garage and all of that? So we thought, let us take a look at it because it really is an ideal location and wouldn't it be nice if we could stay there? So Janet and her team took a look and did some work for us so we could either rule it in or rule it out. And because this is really the kind of final step in the process for us, looking at 210 Lancaster Street, looking at new construction, and then the final sort of piece of the due diligence is to look at the existing station and whether or not we can make a complete renovation, expansion work and tie it into the parking garage. So we will hit you with a lot of information real fast, and then if we could just go to executive session real quick after. Yes, ready?
Thank you for bringing me here again to present. Once again, I'm Janet Slamenda from HKT Architects. I'm the principal. I worked on the original study of the other project. And again, as the mayor spoke, we are looking at the existing building to see if it can be renovated, it can be added on to, what would have to be done in order to make it work for the police department in the future. So we're going to talk about the outcome for this study phase. What we did was we reviewed the space needs assessment with the chief. We looked at a general conditions assessment, and then we did some reuse options for the building and site. So the expected outcome was to reprogram, to work with the chief to make sure that the program that we had developed before was still the same program. And then once we had that we would use that information for the diagrams. We did a structural review. That's the most critical piece of this building because we know the building is too small right now to accommodate the police department program. But what could we do to it and how would that happen? So we had our structural engineer in. And then if there were any related code issues that we had to address on a very basic level, and then we did some layout diagrams. So what you're looking at there, of course, is the two, we also looked at the parking structure next door to see if there's somehow we could tie in using the parking structure for the project as well. We met with the police chief and the police department and reviewed the operations and the existing documentation. We toured Church Street once again, looking at it with a different eye this time. Now we're looking at it for how they operate now in the building and how they could operate in the future. And then we revised and finalized the room data information that we had done before. So we looked at every single space. The chief and I sat for hours and looked at every single space to see if we could cut the program, if there was any program that we missed or would needed to be added. So we did all of that. And what you're looking at here are standard spaces in the building, the office space, the cell block area, the officer areas, and the booking area on the lower left. This is the program that we came up with. It's a total of 25,287 square feet of space, and the same component pieces that are always in most police departments, which include a public area where the house officer interacts with the community, firearms licensing, domestic violence offices, spaces like that, the administrative spaces, the chiefs, the lieutenants, and the support spaces for the building, the operations where the officer in charge, where there's roll call, where there's evidence, and an armory. There's the detention area, which includes both the Sally Port and the cell block area, and then the support spaces for a building, which includes mechanical rooms and IT and things like that. So we came up with that number. We are, as part of this, we already knew that we were going to plan on relocating dispatch out of the building. They were not in the program originally, unless there was extra space, and again, they are not in the program this time as well. Along with that, there's exterior programming that includes mostly parking in this instance, as well as things like generators and transformers and things like that. But the total parking spaces needed is 135. That includes the actual police vehicles as well as parking for the personnel, which includes two shifts always, the shift that's on and the shift that's coming on. They double over. And then trailers, things like that, and visitors. So I think there's a one space difference than before. So it's the same amount of vehicles as we saw in the other program. From an architectural point of view, I'm just going to show you a bunch of pictures. A lot of you probably know this building on some level, but you may not. You may not know have been in the depths of the building, but these first spaces are all spaces that support the police officers, including their roll call rooms and their report writing rooms, locker rooms, including the women's locker room, which used to be an office, but now is a locker room because that's the way they have to do it. There are the cell block areas, including rooms that are people that are have a difficult emotional states. There's the booking areas. There's the Sally Port itself. There's ammunition rooms, maintenance rooms, everything that supports the back of the house spaces of a police department that you really always don't want to be part of. And then we have the administrative areas, including this dispatch, the general offices, the lots of records that are part of a police department, and then the IT needs, which is the center picture on the top, which grows by the year. IT has made our lives a little simpler, but it's made the infrastructure and the back of the house parts of any building much more complicated. And then finally, the actual building itself, the plumbing chases, the infrastructure that's being piped along in between the joists and framing, the standing water and some of the sumps because the water level is so high at that part of the building, and just general ways that they have managed to fit in the current the needs of a modern police department among an older building. So the existing condition review, I mean, the clear things that always happen in a building this age, the envelope, it needs repair and replacement, the systems, mechanical, electric, plumbing are are ancient essentially and would need to be replaced. The IT is always an ongoing thing, so that would be upgraded and new. There's some code issues. This building is not fully accessible, so you can get beyond the front door. Essentially not accessible, so any new renovation will require an elevator at the very minimum. Plus the stairs are open stairs, and we would work to make those stairs conform and be consistent from top to bottom. But the most important thing that you do in an existing community is you look at the police operations to determine if the footprint of the building could meet the operational needs of the police department, and will the officers be where they're supposed to be within the building. Not so much can they be accommodated, but are they there to be responsive to the needs? And is there a positive and engaging public presence possible in this building right now? It's a pretty tight little lobby, a very small, narrow window. The original window is much bigger, and it has been changed over the years. Along with this, we did a structural assessment. The good news from the structural engineer is that the structural system appears to be have no signs of distress. There's nothing, breaking, falling apart. The picture on the lower right where you see that column, that alley column, that was a structural repair that was done more recently. So there's been a little bit of stuff over time, but there's nothing, really awful about the building. The brick condition on the outside is in a fair condition, not good, but fair. There is cracking at the south-facing windows, where there's been a lot of thaw and freeze, and buildings just need to be maintained both on the inside and the outside. There's some rust staining on steel lintels, things like that, and some evidence of roof leaks. There also is at the addition where the garages are, which is a one-story above grade, there has been that slab deterioration because vehicles have come into that building over the years. There've been cracking, there's been rusting and deterioration of the beams and structure that has been is in a repaired state right now. There's also some minor corrosion and cracking along walls of that way as well. The structural engineer says you really should, if you're staying in this building, address some of those things and monitor and assess and repair as needed, the roof leaks, the lintel conditions, and the cracks of masonry separation. You can see the gentleman pushing against the wall in the upper left-hand picture. That's the structural engineer, Kevin. And there's a cracking in that wall. We can't see how it exactly, how it's being developed, but we did mark the wall so we can monitor things like that and see if it continues to move and why it's moving. It was impossible to tell without destructive investigation. And we talked about code review from an architectural, but when you go into an existing building, there's all kinds of levels of code review. What we're talking about here is a level 3 code review because we're going to be touching more than 50% of the aggregate area of the building. So we would be analyzing all the loads, and all the loads at those elements, the beams, the columns, whatever support, and we would look at at least minimum seismic retrofits to the edge of this building. They didn't have the seismic requirements that we have today. And then we would determine if those were limited or substantial upgrades required based on this. So it's a long process if you're choosing to use the building. The other thing we looked at from a very general point of view was, if you can go up in this, or add to this building, would you go up vertically above the 2-story building or above the 1-story building, which is considered a horizontal review addition? So you'd be looking at the two possibilities. From the structural engineer's review of the existing drawings, which appear to be matching what was built, that there was limited residual capacity in the foundation. So the building was not ever planned to take an additional floor. Oftentimes conversation comes up during the design that we may add a floor onto this. What can we do? We design those foundations, the framing, whatever, to take that additional load in a future point of view. That these were not designed that way. So anything we would do to add a vertical addition would be extremely costly to complete. From a horizontal addition, it was more likely that we could add on above the garage. We would tear the garage down and build a new garage structure and a new upper building that was substantially separate from the 2-story building. So there is a possibility of that. And then the So we had all that information, and we also looked at the garage next door because of the proximity to it, the fact that the police department uses the parking and they are so close to each other. We thought, well, why can't we, let's look at that, let's explore that as an option. So we, but before that, I do want to say that the presence of these two buildings along Church Street is really important. Being in the center of town is really important to the police department. Everyone knows it is there. We've talked about the entry. We've talked about parking. There is parking on the street. There is parking in the garage available. And there is access to the Sally Port is between the police and the fire departments. And that is that road or that walk, the driveway between it is an access point or sort of a right-of-way into the buildings to sit in the center of the building. So these were the additions that we did. The first one you are seeing here is a addition onto the police department because it was the more reasonable option, was adding on to right here where that's outlined in red. That's an addition onto the garage. So we would, again, tear down the garage, build a new garage, and build a floor above that. The red arrow on the middle plan is the entry to the building, and it would remain pretty much where it is right now. The Sally Port, because it's the only way to get into the building from a grading point of view, would remain on that side between the police and the fire departments, and then we would add a floor up above. So that did a lot of the things that the police were looking for. It maintained presence, it had an accessible entry, the access to the Sally Port was easy enough to get to. However, the final two bullet points are the most important things. That footprint did not grow larger in the building. The footprint only grew on the second floor. So the first floor is not large enough to accommodate operations, personnel, detention, and the public areas as programmed. So, so the building is not big enough on the first floor. And then even with that second floor addition of space, there is still not enough area to do the whole program. What we did to demonstrate this is we made some cuts that we thought that would have we could discuss, and there were in the counts of the cell blocks, there were amounts of the sizes of office, how people would be used. So that was the option, and I'll show you what that would look like in section. It would be I hope people can read this, but that addition is over the garage, so now the whole building would look like it is a two-story structure on Church Street. The next thing we did after that was we looked at adding the vertical addition and the horizontal addition to see, okay, if that's the only place in town you have to do a building, what will we need to do? And again, it has all the same issues. It still maintains the presence, accessible entry. The Sally Port is in the same space. The first floor is still not large enough to accommodate the program, but most of the program is is now accommodated with that additional floor option. The difference between our program area and the amount of space we can provide here is the difference of 160 square feet, which is really great. The problem is it's not where it needs to be. And again, here's the option. This is now Church Street going for 3 levels in the front of the building and 2 levels on the side of the building. We also looked at the garage because, again, we were talking about the options. The first floor-to-floor height is extremely limited. You can see the sign on the bottom. It's 7'2" clearance there. There are precast beams that are continuous from the short end of the building to the short end of the building. There's minimal structural information available about that. The design was done as sort of a design build. These things were built off-site. We would have to do more testing to see what they could hold, but the alteration of these beams or removal of these beams to put in new flooring, if we would put structure there, might result in a forest of columns on the lower level. But that would be something that we consider if that would be worth it to the community. So from an architectural point of view, that limited floor-to-floor height has ramifications. It's only 7'2" plus the depth of the structure, maybe 10 feet in floor-to-floor height. That is 4 to 5 feet below what a normal floor-to-floor height would be from a modern building with all the system structure that goes through it. Interrupting that existing floor construction would require reconfiguration of beams and columns. The parking layout would be reduced, and then to figure out how you would connect to the the next building would require some sort of a bridge, and this is the kind of plan we've been looking at, is to build along the side of the building that most closely connects to the existing, and then building a bridge connection to it. So we would keep, we didn't really go too far with this one because it seemed improbable, but here's the section you're looking at, the garage. You're looking at taking 2 levels of that garage out of use for vehicles and then crossing over into the police department. So we looked at that. And so from a concluding point of view, the most important thing, again, is that the existing first floor, it just isn't large enough to accommodate the police department building. The structural alterations would be significant and extremely costly. The good news is the public presence in town could be maintained and in their current location. The envelope would need upgrades to comply with the energy code and to stabilize the building for the future. We have bricks falling off, panels falling off, things like that. But those things could be brought back. We would be replacing all the interior systems. MEP, FP would be added. There is no sprinkler system in the building now. We would be adding an elevator, and the parking situation for the community would essentially be unchanged or diminished depending on which option was done. That's my presentation.
So in essence, and just so everybody understands, the building is still a strong, solid building. For anybody that is misunderstanding when we talk about the condition of the police department, it is a very strong and stable building. It is by no stretch of the imagination ready for demolition of any sort. There are some issues that we have with the building. Obviously, any building that's 50 years old, there are some parts of the building that you have some cracking on some of the walls, but we're not talking about structural things where things are going to fall in. So even if this is not the location of the police department, this is by no stretch of the imagination. I want to say that again, a building that needs to be torn down at all. This is a very strong functioning building. It does not function as a police department. The flow of the building was designed in 1957, 1960, and with technology added and just the whole movement of the building, that is what doesn't sort of function. There's not enough space in there, and the floor layout from floor to floor and from room to room is what's inadequate. And hats off to the police department, and as you know, we've appropriated some funding to keep the building up. They've done a good job of trying to keep that place up. Some of the pictures look pretty good, and it's because they took the time to keep it clean is what we wanted to do. We knew we were going to end up somewhere else, and the mission was it didn't have to be a dirty building. We could maintain it and keep it up. So that is that. We looked at that alternative. At the end of the day, it's probably not recommended. This is probably not the recommended approach. I know people have asked about tearing the parking garage down, but then that presents another problem about, where to, this, I don't even think this footprint, tearing down the existing building or using the existing building, tearing down the parking garage, still provides for the adequate parking after you're done building the building. So you're still back to that particular issue. So this completes our due diligence on every possible aspect of either renovation or renovation of 210, building a new building. And so this would not be a recommended, based on the amount of money that you'd have to put back into this building and the connections with the, basically rebuild it, put additions on. It still leaves you, can you go back a couple of slides? Mm-hmm. It still leaves you with the, the first floor basically would be, booking and not even dispatch. Basically, the first floor would be a couple of services, and then it just doesn't function with the rest of the building because it's a narrow building is really what it is.
There's actually only one live person on that floor at any one time for the entire police department, the house officer. So there are no offices, no regular support left on that space. By the time you put the elevators in appropriate cell blocks and to meet all the codes and all that stuff, there's really no space left. Everybody has to move upstairs. So one live police officer on the floor is, Chief Coleman, you can comment on what that would mean, but something we don't see.
That wouldn't function at all.
Yeah.
Certainly wouldn't function.
So we have completed our due diligence. 2018, we are on schedule, as we talked at our last meeting when we looked at the analysis between new and renovation at 210. And I think it was the consensus of the city council at the time that, you know, the numbers weren't that far off to do new construction. And we have a loan coming up in 2018 at the library. So we are on schedule now. This part is completed. We're done with this. We're now moving on to the next phase, which is site location, and to begin to work on the plans. Obviously borrowing and bonding and temporary borrowing all in place, but everything is aligned perfectly, and we're ready to move forward. Any questions about this piece here? It's pretty self-explanatory. Just doesn't work well. And what you do is you basically build another building that's gonna outdate itself in 25 years. So you're gonna move in, and in 10 years, you're gonna feel like this building just doesn't work well as far as the flow of the building. From, you know, you're losing people on the second and third floors, and you really need them on the first for public access, and it just doesn't gel. But we tried, and we thought, you know, why not? If we could make it work, that would be a good thing. Tie in the parking garage. But even every day, the parking garage more and more is getting used, as most of the office space and the retail space downtown is taken. It's pretty full every day, and you know, the buildings at Gallagher, the overflow parking from here, pretty much takes up all that parking, and also the parking behind the post office. So that's where we're at. And any questions at all?
I have a question.
Yes.
Did you attach, during the study, any financial projections to the cost of any one of these options?
These options? No,
No.
we did not do that. When the operations failed to work, police department, you know, we discussed with mayor and, you know, what makes sense. And it didn't really make sense to do that, because if you can renovate a building, but if it doesn't work from an operations point of view, then it seemed to be money not well spent at this point. If we were directed to take it to the next step, we could certainly figure out the cost of doing this. But with the square foot program being so short on the most likely option, it didn't seem to be a prudent way to spend more money from the city, but we could do that if we needed to. So.
And bringing it up to code, because all the seismic issues with, you know, with all of that new changes in the code, basically you're building a new building around the old building is what you're doing, because you need to get down below the foundation and rebuild all of that. If you look at our street lights, all our traffic signals, those are all now have to meet all the new seismic code. If you look at them, they're 3 times the size of the old traffic signals.
I mean, the more, you know, adding the 4th floor, which is, or the 3rd floor on the main building, the only way to get the program, even get the physical program in is, you know, the structural engineer couldn't imagine the money that it would take to do that, to get down there and reinforce foundation, you know, rebuild foundations. I mean, you're essentially, as the mayor said, almost tearing down the building to build it back up, and, you know, it wouldn't be my recommendation, but you know, I always get back to operations. You know, we can do anything we want to any building. I mean, if there's money, I can reconstruct anything. It's really, does it work for the police? Does it work for your community? And I don't think it does. So.
Pauline?
You said you anticipate moving dispatch. Is that something that has already been in the works to relocate dispatch? Or is that because of your limited area at the police department now?
No, there's a room there for dispatch.
The conversation about moving dispatch came with a discussion about, the discussion was to make dispatch a public safety dispatch, and consume fire dispatch along with police, and separate it as its own department and move it out of the building. For reasons that I think are too complicated to go into at this meeting. It's been in discussion for 18 months or a couple of years. We've had substantive meetings on it, but there's no. It's in the idea stage right now. But it would be mine, and I think I could speak for Chief Sidlow and tell you that it would be mine and his ultimate goal is to combine dispatch and move it.
Dispatch is becoming a profession in and of itself. And there's so many different moving parts and factors and compliance issues. And the other thing is, eventually, just the mere economics, it's going to force, you know, it could be 5 years, it could be 5 months, it could be 10 years. it's just going to force more regionalization in terms of dispatch. And again, it's its own profession now. I mean, when I worked in there, there's a little guy in the totem pole, you know, seniority, you bid it, you're in the dispatch, here's the phone, you go down to check for warrants, you walk all the way to the back of the building, put everybody on hold, because you're the only one there. It's completely changed from the second the call comes in. Now we're going to be gravitating more back towards cell phones. We'll pick up the nearest police department, because now you dial 911, it's going to some dispatcher in Framingham at the state police, there's time lost. It's all, you know, that whole world is changing. It needs to be in its own sort of, but that's what we're planning for down the road. So what could happen is they might stay where they are for now as we start to build another station, or we may build it into that station and size it appropriately so that, how many stations you have now, 3 or 4?
We have 3 working stations and a training station, so we have 4.
And we'll have to look at, you know, what are the possibilities down the road? Maybe the state helps us to build something larger so that as this regionalization happens and more communities begin to get together, we're all set up for that.
Okay,
But it needs to be its own thing.
thank you.
And so what are the next steps? The next step is identifying some properties, which we have, and I think that was the purpose of going to executive session, just to talk about 2 or 3 of the sites. And then Greg will, Chapter Lane and Purchasing will work on procurement, on putting the request on out into the community with specifications in terms of what the sort of property that we're looking for. And after that is done, at the site assessment in terms of any environmental issues that might be associated with it, and then acquisition. And once we know what the site we're working on, then, not until then, will we begin the whole process of the actual design, because some of the properties will have different geographic sort of elevations, and so we don't want to start doing plans now, but we already have programmed the space that we need and how it needs to flow, and luckily you've worked on a number of projects, so you know exactly the cutting edge, everything that's going on in terms of, you know, technology is our backbone at this point, and we use technology in the police department at all times. If you notice now, if you get in an accident, you don't get that report by going to the police station. You get it online. I mean, there's so much technology that's used. And that's the future of, it's the data we collect, the data that we use. So that is incorporated into the building as well. So that's kind of the schedule. We're hoping to have a piece of property identified and at least put on deposit somewhere around the first of the year. Once that is done, and on the site evaluation is done in terms of any environmental risks or any other issues associated with it, hope to get going on getting the funds for the plans, getting going on those, and yeah, 2018 is the year to get going on the building. And again, the library loan is coming up, so that will help us. But I got to say, there are a lot of projects going on in the state. There's a lack of labor at this point, so prices are pretty much all over the place.
Going up.
So yeah, it's amazing. So we're right on schedule, ready to go.
So you need a,
About to go into.
Motion. to go into executive session.
Executive session after the meeting starts. We gotta go into, we gotta start the meeting first.
Mhm.
We can go into executive session. by
Okay.
law.
Right.
So it's couple minutes after 7:30.
You can't go into an executive session. Okay. While I'm down here.
The statute requires that the meeting be opened first.
Okay. So, on another unrelated matter, you see before you tonight that there is a appropriation for a sweeper. And that is our, as you know, we're under new regulations and standards. And the sweeper that we have is over 10 years and it malfunctioned. driving a piston through the main engine of the unit, and therefore the sweeper is, we could fix it. It's probably going to be a little less to fix the sweeper than it is to buy a new one. So we would probably either use the cabin chassis for another, retrofit it to another piece of equipment. The engine is fine, and the actual sweeper, it's the sweeper part. It's not the truck part, it's the sweeper unit that is obsolete at this point. It's not functioning, and to replace it is just, you're replacing it on a 10-year-old truck. And we probably would still either trade in the truck or continue to, put something else on it and use it. So we put another body on it. They don't come cheap. They have all new, they have to all be sized, and they all have to be conditioned with all the new air regulations. So they are a very expensive piece of equipment, but all the equipment we've been buying recently are all lasting us double the amount of time that we're using to replace them. So if we're buying a truck that used to last 5, they'll last us 10 years. So we're getting our money's worth out of it.
Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
there was some rumor floating around regarding the police cars, and there was some concerns regarding carbon monoxide. Could you just kind of clear that up for us?
Yeah, the chief, we had talked about that. Ford had sent people out, and,
You want me to come back?
yeah.
So it's not rumor. Carbon monoxide had been coming into some of the Ford SUVs. We tested ours. I think one of ours got a hit of like 9 parts per million at about 65 miles an hour on Route 2.
Are you sure he's 65 on Route 2?
It was Mark Amico, Lieutenant Amico.
That was on
Anyway,
the off, that was the off-ramp.
The issue is openings in the body of the vehicle that were usually done by the companies when they install the lights and the radios and all that kind of stuff. We tested all 13 of them, didn't find anything except for one cruiser, I think it was car 5. We've been to MHQ where we bought them from. They've told us how to seal them. Ford engineers are still in Massachusetts. There's all kinds of bulletins out. Our cruisers are safe.
Is there anything that's been recycled into, for example, like emergency management that we
No,
should
no, no,
be
this is the
concerned
Ford SUV
with? Those specific-
only.
Okay.
The, is that the Explorer body, I think? That's it, not the Crown Vics, so.
And we get rid of the Crown Vics.
The Crown Vics are
They go out
tired.
on a flatbed.
They're tired. So, yeah, we're all set on that.
Okay, good, thank you.
All right.
Anything else on any other agenda items tonight that you need me to speak to? Questions? Okay.
We're good.
Okay, we have a 7:05 hearing. The Chair of Public Service is not here this evening, and nor is the second member, the clerk, so the third member will be handling that this evening.
You can read it right from the front.
Okay, this is the hearing, the 7:05 hearing, 4-18 Comcast of Massachusetts, Harvard Street, starting at utility pole number 31-50. Place 1, 3-inch PVC conduit, 187 feet, plus or equal to a proposed 24 by 36-inch vault, continuing from vault 22 feet, I think that's plus or minus, onto private property to service 391 Harvard Street. Does anyone wish to speak on the matter?
Good evening, Dave Llewellyn, Comcast. I'd like to speak in favor of the petition to allow Comcast to install a conduit system to provide service to 391 Harvard Street in Leominster.
You may proceed.
I'm sorry?
You may proceed.
That's pretty much it. I mean, you read the petition. Unless you wanted me to read it again, I can.
Does anyone have any questions? From the audience, does anyone have any questions? For a second time, does anybody have any questions or comments? Third and final time, does anyone have any questions or comments, either in favor or against this petition? Are there any members of the council who have any questions? Any members of the council have any comments?
There's no members on the committee here tonight.
Right.
So, Mr. President, I'd ask that the hearing be closed at this time.
All right. Okay, and we can move right into the 7:10 hearing for legal affairs, petition 81-17.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a hearing before the Leominster City Council relative to amending Chapter 13 of the revised ordinances entitled Motor Vehicles and Traffic by amending Section 13-34 entitled, quote, "No parking on certain streets," end quote, by inserting Wachusett Street, south side, from intersection with Pleasant Street for 450 feet west. This is formally Legal Affairs Petition 81-17. Does anyone in the audience wish to address the council either for or against this petition? Second time, does anyone in the audience wish to address the council either in favor of or against this petition? Third and final time, does anyone in the audience wish to address the council either for or against this petition? Seeing none, are there any members of the city council who have any questions or comments relative to this matter? Seeing none, Mr. President, I declare the public meeting closed.
Okay. And we'll have the open forum in just a few minutes. audience to speak on any matter listed on the council agenda. The members of the city council will not be answering any questions, but will be listening to the opinions expressed by the speaker. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes or less. At this time, we've had one person that has signed up, Holly Koski. Please step to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Holly Koski, I live in Ringe, New Hampshire, 123 Redgate Lane. I used to live in Leominster. Speaking in regards to, you have a school matter, an appropriation finance, $895,000. I just wanted to inform you that today there was a hearing with the state for an unfair labor practice for the custodians. And I also wanted to let you know that I filed an appeal through Galvin's office on Monday due to the fact that I've been trying to get a copy of the outsourced custodian contract, and I have not been successful at it, so I filed an appeal with the state with all the emails and everything. So that's all I just wanted to let you know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this point, no one else has signed up to speak at the public forum, but I will ask, would anybody in the audience like to speak at the public forum? If so, please step to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. Gary Zimmerman, Lynn Haven Road. I just want to talk a little bit about the police station. I know you're going to go in exec about it. I've heard rumors on the land, what they might purchase in places. Again, it's only rumor. But I do hope they do consider getting a price at the old transfer station up by Walmart. You own the land, it's 8 acres of land. You talk about all these parking spots. Again, I don't know the logistics and why it has to stay downtown. I know a lot of people talk about, oh, it's got to stay downtown. And you think with today's technology and everything, you have police cars all around, you got 46 police cruisers, that it wouldn't matter where the police station is, as long as you had a good, nice, new police station with all the updated technology. So I hope they're at least putting a price together that you see the transfer station, because you already own the land. So hopefully that's taken into consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is anybody else in the audience like to speak at the public forum? Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
Melissa Bible, 178 5th Street, Leominster, Mass. And again, just speaking toward the school's funding, knowing that you're not always able to attend school committee meetings and not always getting emails from the school district. Informally, I have been gathering information about students choicing in or out of the district. I'm currently on a personal knowledge, not just through the central office, up to 16 children that I know that will be going out of district to either private or public placements outside at a cost of $160,000. That's just kids I know and I can name today. The other thing is we just received an email at Skyview that kids will no longer be having art classes. They will no longer be having health classes. They will be able to attend band or chorus, but it will be extracurricular, which will make it a specific hardship to low-income families who don't have access to middle school transportation after school. And will then therefore impact the high school programs moving up. And also a fact check of job postings after this huge layoff. The school district now has, as of today, 34 jobs that are posted available. And those just went out on the website, available positions today, due to the number of staff that have been either requested to return or were not even pink slipped and are now leaving the district.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak at the public forum? Once again, would anybody else like to speak at the public forum? And for the third and final time, would anybody else like to speak at the public forum? If not, I declare the public forum closed. 14th, 2017 will now come to order. Will you all please stand and join me for a salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will now take a roll call of the honorable members of the Leominster City Council, beginning with Councilor Dombrowski.
Present.
Councilor Shalfo-Zephyr.
Present.
Councilor Bedanza.
Present.
Councilor Lanciani. Councilor Cormier.
Present.
Councilor Marchian. And I am present. There are 7 members present this evening. The Vice President could not be here tonight, so there are no minutes to approve. So the first order of business is to go into executive session for the consideration of property for a police station. And under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, we are going into executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate, that an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. So at this time, I will ask for a roll call vote to go into executive session, beginning with Councilor Dombrowski.
Yay.
Councilor Shalfo-Zephyr.
Yay.
Councilor Bedanza.
Yay.
Councilor Lanciani. Yay. Councilor Cormier.
Yay.
Councilor Marchian.
Yay.
And I will be recorded as yay, so by a vote of 7-0, we will go into executive session. And this meeting will reconvene after the executive session, and we will do the rest of the business of tonight's city council meeting. Okay. C-6 has been given regular course. Moving on to C-7.
C7, relative to the appropriation of $268,000 to the Highway Capital Outlay Expense Account, same to be transferred from the Stabilization Fund.
C-7 is referred to the Chairman of Finance.
First time on the agenda, regular course, please.
C-7 has been given regular course. C-8.
C-8, relative to the appropriation of $23,500 to the Emergency Management Agency Capital Outlay Account prior year, same to be transferred from the Stabilization Fund.
C-8 is also referred to the Chairman of Finance.
Likewise, Mr. President, regular course.
Okay, C-8 has been given regular course. Moving on to petitions, 5-18.
5-18, National Grid and Verizon New England Incorporated, Christine Street. Install one jointly owned pole on Christine Street between poles 5 and 6.
And 5-18 will be referred to the third member of Public Service.
Mr. President, I'd ask for a regular course and that a hearing be scheduled on August 28th, 2017 at 7:05.
Okay, so 5-18 will be given regular course, and we will take a vote to establish a hearing on August 28th, 2017 at 7:05 p.m. All those in favor of establishing that hearing, please signify in usual manner. Those opposed, by a vote of 6-0, because I will be abstaining on this because it involves my employer. That hearing has been established. Moving on to 6-18.
618, National Grid and Verizon New England Incorporated, Adams Street. Remove one jointly owned pole, pole 7, on Adams Street and relocate it beginning at a point approximately 115 feet northeast of the center line of the intersection of Adams Street and Cotton Street.
And 6-18 will also be referred to the third member of Public Service.
Mr. President, we'd ask for a regular course and to schedule a hearing for August 28th at 7:10 p.m.
Okay, so 6-18 has also been given regular course, and we will take a vote to establish a hearing on August 28th, 2017 at 7:10 p.m. All those in favor of establishing that hearing, please signify in usual manner. Those opposed, by a vote of 6-0, the hearing has been established. I will also be abstaining from that one. And moving on to appointments.
Appointments, Peter Nile, Disability Commission, term to expire April 15th, 2020.
And this appointment is referred to the clerk of Ways and Means.
Thank you, Mr. President. First time on the calendar, regular course. I'm not sure if any councilors here this evening would like to have him come down here. We all know Mr. Nile on the building inspector, so does anyone needs to chat with him on this? Through the chair.
Yep.
Right,
Councilor
through the chair,
Schaffhauser.
too. Yeah, I'm curious as to why he'd want to be on the Disability Commission. I mean, is because he works for the, well, I guess, I don't know, because he works for the city, but I guess other people that work for the city sit on boards and commissions, but I would be curious just to ask him what is, either he can respond in writing, you know, or he could come down. It's not a big deal, I'm just curious.
Through the chair, respect that. You want to have
Thank
him
you.
come down?
Sure. We'll set up an interview.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, being the
Thank you.
candidate, you're welcome. Being the candidate, but also a city employee, I think maybe a roll call vote at the end of the meeting will just kind of solidify that, because he does work around the clock, so
Yep.
we'll make
Right.
sure we do it properly. Okay, so regular course.
Okay. All right, so this appointment has been given regular course. Moving on to matters before the city council, items under legal affairs, 35-17, and this will be referred to the chairman of legal affairs.
Thank you, Mr. President. 3517, Kristen Kelly, on behalf of the Planning Board, modify Section 22-50.4.1 of the Leominster zoning ordinance to remove the words "shall service no more than 2 lots" and replace with "are not permitted." We had a subcommittee meeting earlier this evening, and we're light 2 members of the full city council, so the recommendation is further time.
All right, so you've heard the recommendation of the chairman of legal affairs to give 35-17 further time. Is there any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of giving 35-17 further time, please signify in usual manner. Those opposed, by a vote of 7-0, 35-17 has been given further time. Moving on to items under public service, 4-18.
Thank you, Mr. President. 4-18, Comcast of Massachusetts, Harvard Street, starting at utility pole number 30-50, place 1 3-inch PVC conduit, 187 feet, to a proposed 24 by 36-inch vault continuing from Vault 22 feet onto private property to service 391 Harvard Street. At this time, Mr. President, it would be my recommendation to grant 4-18.
Okay, so you've heard the recommendation of the member of Public Service who was present to grant 4-18. Is there any discussion?
My only comment is, I'm sure there was a very high-priced representative from Comcast here tonight, and for that gentleman to come down here and really have absolutely no clue or anything to say about it, it was kind of a waste of time for him, so I respect that. So my communication through the chair to the Comcast is, at least shed some light on exactly what you're doing, know a little bit about what's going on. So I feel bad for the guy that had to come down here on such a beautiful night. I'm ready to move forward.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those, and also, just for the record, Comcast is not my employer, but my employer disallows me from voting on anything that is a competitor of theirs, so I also cannot vote on this. Is there any, if there's no other discussion, all those in favor of granting 4-18, please signify in the usual manner. Those opposed, by a vote of 6-0, 4-18 has been granted. Moving on to the City of Leominster's financial report. Mr. Chairman, are you ready to report?
Yes, Mr. President. We began the fiscal year with a balance in the stabilization account of $14,517,854.57. There have been two school appropriations, one that needs to be ratified this evening, one of $1.3 million, the other one of $895,000. Two more communications were given regular course this evening. So the total past and pending appropriations from the stabilization account total $2,486,500. If everything passes, that'll leave a balance in the stabilization account of $12,031,354.57.
Okay, so that is the financial report. Is there any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we will move right into items under finance, beginning with C-4. Mr. Chairman, are you ready to report?
Yes, Mr. President. C-4, relative to the appropriation of $2,000 to the Police Department overtime account, same to be transferred from the Disability Commission fines reserved for appropriation account. This is something that periodically occurs. We have a letter from the Treasurer and Collector, David LaPlante, who oversees the fund, wherein the Police Department has asked him for $2,000 from that account, the overtime fines account, to continue their handicap parking enforcement work. As we know, that account is funded through fines that are levied against parking violators, handicap parking violators. It would be my position to grant C-4, and I'll check with the members of my committee.
I agree.
Through the chair, I agree.
Okay.
So the unanimous recommendation, Mr. President, is to grant C-4.
Okay, so you've heard the unanimous recommendation of the Finance Committee to grant C-4. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of granting C-4, please signify in the usual manner. Those opposed, by a vote of 7-0, C-4 has been granted. Does the chairman have an order?
Yes, Mr. President, order that the sum of $2,000 be appropriated to the Police Department overtime account, same to be transferred from the Disability Commission fines reserved for appropriation account. Move for the adoption of the order.
Okay, you've heard the request for the adoption of the order. All those in favor of adopting the order, please signify by saying yea.
Yea.
Those opposed, by a vote of 7-0, C-4 has been adopted. Moving on to C-5.
C-5, relative to the appropriation of $895,000 to the School Department expense account, same to be transferred from the stabilization fund. This was granted at our last meeting with an emergency preamble and requires a ratification vote this evening. It would be my position to ratify C-5. I'll check with members of my committee.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Through the
Councilor
chair, I
Marshall.
concur.
Okay, so you've heard the unanimous recommendation of the Finance Committee to grant and ratify C-5. Is there any discussion? Councilor Marchand.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm glad to see we're confirming this tonight to move forward with the whole thing. As a member of the Finance Committee and a standing counselor down here for over 2 decades now, I'm really delighted that there has been the perception of a working relationship between the comptroller in the city of Leominster and the new business manager of the school department. However, we really took a hit down here for approximately 5 months. And, you know, the community itself, I think they mandated the process to include the council. And we all felt that. At least I did, and I'm sure my colleagues did as well. The challenge we had was understanding that even, you know, to the anatomy of the school committee members themselves, there was still a school committee member that stood at that podium asking us to submit an emergency appropriation for the schools. And as we know, we just can't do that. We just can't do it. But at the same time, I think it's incumbent upon us to really get a handle on what's happening with the school department. In the transparency of what was happening with the school department, everyone that was on the council when I was the council president knows that twice we officially tried to have a joint meeting with the school committee, and we were denied twice the opportunity to meet with them. Now, whether that came from their chair or the committee members or the charter in the city of Leominster, it was a combination of things. But what happened was in January of 2016, when the school department identified that they had a crisis that was imminent and it was going to happen, and it did happen, you know, we were brought into a joint meeting. But quite frankly, the night of that joint meeting that we participated in, I felt it was more of a philosophical debate between the school committee members that were trying to figure out what the heck was going on and what they were going to do. So there was really, outside of a few questions raised by some of my colleagues here on the floor, there really wasn't a heck of a lot we could do. You know, but listen to them and understand the complexity of what they were actually experiencing going through. I think in the spirit of cooperation, because ultimately we end up having to pass a city budget that includes the school department's budget, it is incumbent upon us to request from the school department, whether it comes from a voluntary method or measure, or it comes from a resolution on the floor of the council at a later date, we need to work with the school department to help the school department to keep an eye on what's happening. Not that we micromanage it, but as a member of finance, I would love to see where they're at right now financially, a breakdown, a financial analysis of where they are, where they're going. I'd like to see what's happening on a month-to-month basis. And if there's a crisis that's actually taken place, or it's forthcoming, which we could anticipate something happening next year with potential Medicaid cuts and also federal funding as a result of the new administration in the education department, you know, we need to have a handle on this before it happens, and it doesn't end up down on our lap. So it's not a question from my seat to intimidate the superintendent or the business manager or the school committee. They still have the responsibility, a very arduous one, to micromanage over $70 million. But I think as a member of the city council, I can't go to all the meetings. I'm not privy to everything that happens, but I think we need to become, at least to be able to formulate an understanding of what they're muscling through, because it's going to be crisis management for them the entire school year. I can't talk on personnel matters because, you know, my wife and my daughter are both employed and have been for a long time with the school department, but they are in crisis in certain areas of the school department. We heard about a letter that came out tonight in the public forum that some of us became privy to regarding one of the middle schools. It's happening everywhere, from the trade school to the high school, all the way through. So we need to work with them. We need to understand and be educated by them on what is happening as we go through this process, so we are not only more accountable to all the people and kids that came down here, but also when it comes to the budget process to be able to lobby on behalf of the process, however that unfolds. You can define that any way you want. But the bottom line is, you know, we're feeling the crunch. We're feeling the crunch. I'm feeling it as a fundraiser. I've been actively fundraising in this community since the late 80s. It was the Field of Dreams when we expanded the Lassie complex. It was the onset of the DARE program for 10 years with Officer Nolan. We started the Starburst program when they dropped it for 2 years, 25-year anniversary, Johnny Appleseed. Every youth program, you know, helping in any way we possibly can. A lot of us do that. That's in our blood. We just do it. But you have no idea how challenging it is for me right now to have gone to an emergency meeting with the coaches and the specific members of the booster clubs of Leominster High School and sit down and have a $40,000 deficit that is going to mean that we have to come up with that amount of money by spring for spring sports. Because everybody's agreed, including the superintendent, to have a comprehensive fall and winter program, but we're going to be shortchanged at the end. So Friday, I'm sitting down with 3 philanthropists in the city of Leominster, and I'm lobbying, which, by the way, they committed a donation anonymously to the Leominster High School Athletic Fund to help with this. But their concern is that it doesn't happen again. Their concern is that we as elected officials are in a situation where we know there's a problem, we have to fix it. We don't just keep throwing money at cancer. And unfortunately, and I'm not going to point the finger at the school committee members, they did the best they could with what they have and what they know and what they got. But however, at the same time, it's responsible for us now to join up with them collaboratively. And again, not in a bully form, not in a situation where we're going to intimidate them to do what they need to do, but to at least become privy to what the heck is going on, and we need to know. We just need to know. And I don't feel confident as a standing member and a senior member of this council that I'm going to have that access to information. So I think in a cooperative fashion, it would be incumbent upon the superintendent himself to send a letter down to this council letting us know that we will have monthly reports just like we get from the comptroller. Every time the finance chair comes down here, we get a report. We know what's happening in the city of Leominster, and we know we can go to the comptroller individually and ask questions and get answers. We're not going to drive them crazy over in the school department office. They have so much to do, it's unreal. But the bottom line is we need to have some integrity where we know what's going on, because this is a big part of the budget, and it can't happen again. So we will go out, we will sell to the public to help bail us out this year. We will raise the money necessary, but it can't be year after year after year. So I'm not sure, you know, how we want to handle this as a council, but I just wanted to share that with you as a member of finance regarding C5. Thank you.
Okay, is there any discussion? Councilor Shalfo-Zephyr.
Absolutely. I agree with Councilor Marchand that it would be helpful to get an update. And I'm the chairperson of the Committee on Public Schools. So what I will do is we'll schedule the meeting under new business, I guess, but to address specifically what you're talking about, I think it would be really helpful to invite the school committee. I think in the past, my understanding of their concern was that going directly to the superintendent caused a problem because the superintendent works for the school committee. So if we go through the school committee, I will reach out through the clerk to the school committee and would love to see school committee members along with the superintendent and Mr. Fratto, the business manager, come down and give us and the public an update on the planning that's been going on since, you know, the budget disaster of 2017. So we'll schedule that, and I think that that will be helpful and useful information for everybody.
Through the chair,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, is there any other discussion on C-5? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of granting C-5, please signify in the usual manner. Those opposed, by a vote of 7-0, C-5 has been granted. Moving on to old business, we have a second reading of an ordinance. Is the Chairman of Legal Affairs ready to report?
I am. Second reading of an ordinance, amend Chapter 13 of the revised ordinances entitled Motor Vehicles and Traffic by amending Section 13-34 entitled No Parking on Certain Streets by inserting Wachusett Street, South Side, from intersection with Pleasant Street for 450 feet west. This is formerly Legal Affairs Petition 81-17. We did get a letter in a ordinance form from KP Law indicating that that was in fine shape, and my recommendation is to adopt the second reading of the ordinance.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation to adopt the second reading of this ordinance. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we will do this in a roll call vote to adopt the second reading of this ordinance, beginning with Councilor Dombrowski,
Yay.
Councilor Shalfo-Zephyr.
Yay.
Councilor Bedanza.
Yay.
Councilor Lanciani. Councilor Cormier.
Yay.
Councilor Marchian.
Yay.
And I will be recorded as yay by a vote of 7-0. The second reading of this ordinance has been adopted. Is there any other old business to come before the City Council? Councilor Shalfo-Zephyr.
Yeah, thank you very much. Through the chair to the Chairman of Finance, two things. On C7, which is a request, an appropriation request for $268,000 for highway capital outlay from stabilization, there really isn't any detail. I mean, in the attached letter, Mr. Racine mentions, that they had a problem. But what I would like to see is a quote, or where that $268,000 number came from. That would be really helpful. And then the other thing, again, through the chair to the finance chair, C-2, I think was at our last meeting, and it was an appropriation request for $55,000 to the school transportation expense account, and it was regarding McKinney-Vento transportation aid for homeless students. So I have a note here, this is backup to be provided, and I just would like to ask that question again.
I haven't had a chance to talk to the
That's okay.
comptroller, but I will follow up on that.
Thank you.
And get
I'll
you-
hang on to the note.
Get you a breakdown as well as C7.
Yeah, thank you, that would
You're
be
welcome.
helpful. Breakdown, just where it comes from, if we
Right.
get notification from the state.
I understand.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Marchian, did I also see your hand
If
for
I
old
may,
business?
Mr. President, if I can ask, I'd like to make a motion for a vote right now to bring Peter Nile, the building inspector, down here for a brief interview with the Ways and Means Committee regarding his appointment to the Disability Commission.
Okay, all those in favor of
We have a
bringing...
second on it?
Do we have a second? Okay, we have a second. All those in favor of bringing Peter Nile down to the City Council at a time that can be arranged with the city clerk, please signify in the usual manner. Those opposed, by a vote of 7-0, he will be notified. Is there any
Thank you.
other... You're welcome. Is there any other old business to come before the City Council? Any new business to come? Councilor Shalfo-Zephyr.
Yes. I would like to extend an invitation to the chair and the vice chair of the school committee, asking for them to come down and give us an update on what's going on in terms of the business plan that the school department has put together to meet this challenging budget year. And as part of that request, it would be helpful to have Mr. Jolica, the superintendent, as well as Mr. Fratto, who's the business manager. And we can schedule it certainly at their convenience, but, within the next, I'd like to see it, before the end of September. I'd like to have that scheduled.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other new business? Seeing none, is there anything to come under the community calendar? No? Okay. All right, if there's no other business to come before the City Council, then I will ask for a motion and a second to adjourn. Okay. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify in usual manner. Okay, by a vote of 7-0, the City Council meeting for August 14th, 2017 is now adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Mm-hmm.